I am your host, Bill Burke, and I am very excited for my next guest. He's a new friend. He's a former professional baseball player. He is the founder of Reconstructing Wealth. And most importantly, he is the father of 7 kids. Matt Morizio, welcome to the show.
Man, thank you so much for having me on here. It's just an honor to be here. It really is.
Yeah, no, I love that we get to have this conversation. And I've got to start by asking you those questions, or at least one question about those 7 kids, because having 7 kids is, I can't think of a different environment or scenario where you need more mental toughness. So just tell us a little bit about what life is like in your household with 7 kids. I've got 2, and there are certainly challenges. So would love to start by hearing just what a day-to-day life looks like for you and your wife.
Man, it's noisy. We put it that way. You know what's really funny is I don't have it on right now, but my Apple Watch routinely every week, I would say it happens. It has that little ear notification to say you're in a loud environment, and if you sustain this environment for 30 minutes or so, it could lead to damage eardrum damage. It's really funny, but that's just my normal volume. The house is full, literally and figuratively. My oldest is 13. My youngest is 2. We homeschool our kids too. They're always around. So when I laugh when friends of ours who kids are in school, they're home for Christmas break, or even summer is the long one, but like week-long April break or spring break.
Yeah.
They'll say to me, man, they're around, and it's like, I don't know what other activities to do. They just are like bored. And I'm like, your vacation break is my everyday. That's just life with us. They're always there, which we're not complaining. That's by design. We feel like we are really squeezing every drop of juice out of their childhood. That's part of it. We feel like them being around, even though time flies, them being around as much as they are doesn't feel as much like we're missing out on their childhood as other friends of mine that I talk to who they wake their kids up at 6 o'clock. They're out the door at 6:45. They're in school till 3. Then they're in after activities till 5:30. Then it's homework. Then it's dinner. Then it's bed. And it's like, I didn't even connect with my kid all day. I didn't even see them. Whereas we have the luxury. We've chosen that path. Call it a luxury. It's much harder than sending your kids to school many days. But we have chosen the path of saying, okay, we're going to do this in our home so that 6:30 a.m. wake up doesn't need to happen necessarily for them. But also they're around until the school bell hits, really like 3 o'clock or whatever it is. They still are involved in a bunch of sports and stuff. So like the afternoons, evenings of our life get super hectic during the school year. But we still have that sweet moments. That's why I say sweet. Sometimes they're sweet and other times they're sour moments where they're around during the daytime hours.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. It's what I heard you say is just it's all about being intentional. And I love that because I think that so many people aren't. We just do what we do because it's just what everybody else does or it's what's expected. So I love that. And I don't think it sounds like you're going to regret that decision at all. So I'd love to hear that.
Thanks. Yeah. It's funny you say that. I make a lot of decisions. I call it my deathbed perspective is what I call it. I don't know. I'm not the
Yes.
first to think of this, but if I'm lying on my deathbed and I think about whatever decision I'm trying to make, homeschooling, for example, will I be upset that I chose to keep them home versus send them to school? And I can't confidently say, yeah, I'll be mad that I kept them home. I think I'll actually be happy about it. So it helps me. That's a great filter for me to make decisions today that matter, to be quite honest.
Yeah, you make me think of this quote I heard. I don't know who said it, so I apologize, but I think I heard it on the Tim Ferriss podcast years ago, and he was interviewing somebody, and I think she said the philosophy that she really lives by is she asks herself something similar. She asks herself, when I'm old, how much money would I pay to go back in time and experience the moment that I'm experiencing right now? And I think that's a great way to live your life. And it
Wow.
sounds like you're on that. Yeah, that just made me think of a quote that I hadn't heard for a long time. So thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, it's
But
really
I
good.
love that you're doing that. But I want to dive into what you do professionally more than anything, because I think it speaks to a lot of people who are struggling out there. And your whole background is in finance and building wealth. And as you put it, reconstructing wealth. So I'm just curious, let's go back or take me back years ago for you. What was your earliest memory of money and how has that shaped your belief system now?
My earliest memory, or I would say, yeah, one of the most impactful memories that I can remember It was not my earliest, but I'll say one of the most impactful. I remember I was in college at the time, but this kind of is echoed throughout my entire childhood. This, for whatever reason, is standing out to me when you ask the question. I was home. I lived in Boston at the time, in the Boston area, and went to school at Northeastern up in that area. So it's cold in winter, and I'm home for Christmas, which means there's potentially snow on the ground. I don't remember, but it's definitely in freezing temperatures. And my house, my mother and father divorced when I was young. She still lives in our childhood home while my brother and I are away at college. So she's alone in that home most of the time at this point of life. And that home was heated by oil, and oil heat is expensive. And I remember coming home that Christmas for break, and I don't know where I was coming from, but I had gotten home, opened the door, and I went in the house, and it was cold. That's not uncommon. My mother liked to keep the heat down to save on the oil bill. When I went in down a hallway to go into kind of the living room where she was, there was heavy blankets draped in the doorway that effectively just blocked the room. So I remember peering around the corner of one of the blankets, peeled it back, and my mother was sitting in the room watching TV in her kind of down blanket, staying warm. I'm like, Mom, what are you doing in here? All the lights are off outside. Like, that room is the only room she's in, only lights on. And I'm saying, Mom, what is going on with the blankets? What are we doing? And I remember as I pulled the blanket back, it was warmer. Like, I felt warmth. And I realized as I'm asking the question that she's effectively just cocooning herself in the room to save on heat. The heat's way down, but when she put the blanket up and stayed in that room.
Matt, I lost you on the audio. I can't hear you at all. Seemed like the connection on your end just went out, but that doesn't make sense either because I got the video. Can still see you. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't be more help. I'm gonna keep it rolling in case you can figure it out here in the next couple seconds. But yeah, I'm not sure. We were going good there for a while. Matt, curious, what was your first memory of money and how has that shaped your belief system now?
That's such a good question. I actually ask that question a lot of times to people that I'm working with. That I'm not going to say it's my first memory, but it is one that stands out that really defines, I think, my childhood and my relationship with money as a kid. I remember I was in college at the time, so it wasn't my earliest memory. I was in college and I lived in the Boston area, I went to school actually at Northeastern in Boston too. So in the wintertime, I was home for Christmas. The wintertime in Boston is cold. So I remember I was home for the break. I went into my house, and my mom lived in our childhood home. My parents had divorced when we were young. She still was there, but my brother and I were away in college. So she was alone there most of the time. So she really started to create her own little habits. And I remember going into the house, I don't know where I was coming from, but I walked into the house and all the lights were off, which was not abnormal. Save on electricity, keep the lights off. But I went into the room where she was in, down a hallway and around the corner. And before I got into the room, there were these heavy blankets draped in the hallway. In the doorway, excuse me. And I had to peel the blanket back to get into the room. And when I did that, I noticed it was warmer in the room. And I was like, what are we doing in here? Why are the lights off? What are you doing with these blankets? What is this about? And I realized in that moment, without her even having to answer, because I felt the warmth, she was effectively just cocooning herself in a room so that she could keep the oil heated temperature down, because oil heat's expensive. So she's keeping the temp way down, cocooning herself in the room, and really using her own body heat inside a room to keep it warm enough. Not warm, but warm enough. And that was, in a nutshell, my entire childhood as it relates to money. That's not a mindset of abundance, or it's one of fear, one of worry, one of lack, scarcity. It never felt like there was enough. There was always a worry and an apprehension around money. I don't blame her, because she adopted that mindset from her parents, who are products of Great Depression era parents. If we don't talk about money like anything else, nothing changes. And as a kid, we talked about it earlier with a couple kids, more is caught than taught with kids. So what ends up happening, I've learned as it relates to money, is we just end up catching whatever mindsets, habits, emotions our parents have toward finances, because we don't ever speak about it. Will adopt and absorb whatever our parents thought about money, and that becomes our mindset and our relationship with money. And if we don't choose to break that chain, we'll just pass it on for generations until hopefully somewhere along the lineage, somebody decides to take the reins and say, hey, this is crazy. We don't have to think this way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why the work that you're doing now is so important. And we're going to get into that a little bit more too. But I wanted to ask you, as a follow up, you saw the picture of scarcity from the story that you just described. Was there a turning point years later where you started to challenge that belief that scarcity was just the norm and it's how everybody operated? Was there a turning point or maybe an incident that started to open your mind a little bit more to what was possible?
The turning point for me really was about a decade ago, not quite, when I jumped into this wealth management world, the financial advising world. I was thrust into the world of personal finance. So I actually maintained that worried scarcity mindset about money, that fearful approach toward money, where I didn't want to open my bank accounts because I was worried. I felt like I needed to. It was my obligation to squeeze a quarter out of every nickel I had. Like, it felt like that was my duty, and that was the right mindset. Always find the cheapest deal, never pay full price. All of that was almost a badge of honor, all the way until, man, early 30s. So I carried that my whole life nearly, until thankfully I got thrust into the world of personal finance, and I was forced to learn the rules of the game. I never learned them. But if I am going to be a effective wealth manager and financial advisor, money coach, I better learn the rules of the game so that I can teach people how to play and use the rules really to their advantage. So I started learning how the game of money worked, and I understood different levers, we'll call them, like savings rates versus interest rates, investments rates, and debts, and all the things, and understood now how that whole ecosystem played together. And as I started to learn the rules of the game, my fears started to dissipate. And I realized, like, why did I learn this stuff beforehand? Makes no sense. I equate it to this. When you go into your freshman year of high school, that week leading up to it, when you're still in eighth grader, summer, you're worried like anything to become a freshman because the school, the teachers, the layout, the students, the classes, like all the things are new. And you're fearful of all that because you have no idea what to expect. You got to go do it. And then by the end of the first week, that Friday of the first week, 80% of those fears are gone because you're like, oh, I know where the classroom is. It's not that hard to figure out. I'm starting to already understand my schedule. I know who my teammates are, my classmates are, excuse me. And money happens the same way, except that, like me, until I was forced into the world, most of us live our entire adult lives like incoming freshmen, is the best way I can describe it. None of us, not none, most of us choose not to go and learn the rules of the game. But I promise, I'm case study number one. As you start to learn the rules of the game, those fears and anxieties around it start to just fade away because you're like, oh, that's not that scary. That's not that bad. Just like high school.
Man, it is not a coincidence that we are speaking today, and I'm smiling because I just had this conversation with my daughter, who will be a freshman in high school in about a month. And so all of those fears that you just described are prevalent in the Burke household right now. So I love that. And I've never heard that analogy, but you're 100% right. And I told her
Right.
the exact same thing today in the car. I said, a week into it, it'll all be over and you'll be a pro. So I love that you brought that up. It makes me smile. But you're right. We all are
Come
still
on.
are, as adults, we're like freshmen in so many different things. I love that connecting of the dots. What does financial fortitude mean to you? Because everything that you just described, it takes a lot of mental energy and toughness to fight against all of those feelings and in pictures and stories that have been woven into us from childhood. So how does somebody begin to do that? How did you do that? And how do you now start to coach other people through your experience?
It starts with the realization that I've got a problem. Maybe you don't have to say it in those words, but it works because people show up saying, I've got an issue that I need to work on. So the realization of, man, there's something that's stopping me here with these finances. I'm not supposed to feel anxious every time I open my bank account or my investment account, or feel fearful if my investments drop by a little percent, or worry about every single bill that comes in, worried if I ever have enough. Now, there are seasons, and I promise I've been through them, where there may not be enough. And that doesn't feel good, but there are also levers to pull, not all of them great, but there are ways to extend the runway if you need to. My point is, it's not until you recognize that you've got something that needs changing that you can start to take the steps towards making the change. So for me, really, the realization is, man, I don't know a thing about this. That's enough. You don't have to say, oh, I have an unhealthy relationship with money. You don't have to use those words. If you're on a diet, you don't have to necessarily say, dang, I really emotionally eat. Food is my pacifier. You don't have to say that language. You could just say, I don't know a darn thing about nutrition. Let me start learning something because I'm overweight and I need to fix something. So let me at least start learning. And the same is with money. You don't have to use the language that says, I have an unhealthy relationship that needs adjustment. You don't speak like that. You could just say, I really don't know anything about personal finances and I feel like I want to. So let me start. But it's there at that point of realization that there needs to be a change, that change can happen.
Yeah, yeah, very good. You talk also, or you emphasize emotional detachment from money. So, how does somebody actually start to shift from a fear based mentality to looking at money as maybe more of a tool that drives towards some sort of greater purpose?
Yeah, I'm going to be on a crusade maybe the rest of my life to redefine financial freedom. I'm going to define financial freedom as one who has emotionally detached from their money, not one who has enough money to fund their entire life. Because
Ooh,
I have now interacted with too many people that have plenty of money to fund their life, that have terrible bondage with money. Like they are bound by their finances, even though they got enough. So on paper, they are financially free. They are not free. I've talked to them. They're not okay. The ones who are free financially are the ones who are emotionally detached. Now, like the asterisk to that is we're still human. So there are seasons of life that even as good as you can get with your relationship with money, it's going to be hard and you will be emotional about it. So don't beat yourself up. You're human. But the more you see finances as chess pieces on a chessboard, tools to be used, and the less you feel your money, the better off you're going to be. So I'm going to be on that crusade maybe the rest of my life. And I'll give you two. We already touched on one, but I'll give you two real ways that somebody can really get that going. The first one is education. So if somebody really wants to go down that path of saying, I want financial freedom as Matt defines it, you got to get educated on it. We talked about that incoming freshman mentality. We've got to overcome and break through that wall. If you're in that place and you don't know where to start, I'm going to encourage you to get on the internet, type in ChatGPT. I don't care if you've never used it before, just say, I am a novice when it comes to personal finances. Please tell me what top 5 questions I should be asking. And then it'll spit out 5 great questions. And those questions aren't going to be biased questions because it's going to search the entire web, way more information than you and I could ever process in our lifetimes, to distill what top 5 questions somebody who's just starting out with their money should be thinking about. And then you can ask ChatGPT, okay, now please answer those questions. You don't even have to say please. It's not even human. That's the best part. It's not a person. And most people, they won't get started with their money because they don't want to talk to somebody because they're embarrassed. Good news, chat is not a person. You don't even have to use manners. Just ask. That's the long game. Because for me, I've learned a lot. And as I learn more, I learn how much I don't know, then I learn more. But all the while, I'm learning this world and this ecosystem, realizing like there's nothing to be fearful of. There are good moves and bad moves, or there are moves that work and there are moves that don't work, but they're not good moves and bad moves. There's just, those are like emotionally assigned language toward these decisions you make. You have data, you make a decision with your data, it works out or it doesn't work out. You course correct. That's like life. The second way that I will share with you for people to really achieve what I will die on that cross of financial freedom, like emotional detachment, is loosen up your grip on it. I'll give you this image. If someone were to throw you a pass to give you something and you kept tight fists and you had to try to catch the ball, you might be able to do it. But if they throw hard enough and long enough, like, you're going to drop a lot of balls. You cannot receive what you're trying to receive with closed fists. And I'm going to let that image marinate for a minute because that's exactly how money works. If you live your life financially with tight fists wrapped around your money, you will never receive what you're called to receive with finances. You've got to open up your grips and receive what you're called to receive. So if you want to really get good with money, give a little bit away. Loosen up your grip. Start to give some. You know, that right there, I don't need to get all into the subconscious, but there is science behind the emotional detachment and generosity. There's a lot there. But if you start to give a little bit away, I'm not saying give so you can't even buy groceries anymore. I'm saying set aside an account or something that is for other people. You start to loosen up your grip on money. I promise you, money can't have a stronghold on you as you start to loosen up your grip.
Yeah, you mentioned generosity part of this whole picture, and I think that's, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be a central pillar in your approach. So, what have you personally learned about generosity that's changed you? I know that you've went through a personal transformation on your own path. So, what happened there that kind of changed your mentality, and then how did you actually start to put generosity into practice?
Yeah, as I started to learn how money worked, I'm maybe a year or so or 2 years into this financial advising world. And I'm consuming information because I need to be able to distill it into plain English to be able to help people. So I'm learning and learning. And as I'm learning, I'm understanding how it works. And it's also shining this light on the stronghold money has had on me my entire life. I'm realizing like I don't see things for value at all. I see things as a price. Here's an example. If you had a grandmother that you loved that was in her dying days, and the only thing she wanted from you was a certain sweater, and it was going to mean the world for her, and you knew, just let's use sweater as an example, that sweater was going to really just change her emotionally. It wasn't about the sweater. The sweater just represented something to her that was going to bring her joy. And she's on her deathbed. And you go to the store and there's sweaters there. If you're probably not going to go in and look at the price tag and say, sorry, Nana, can't do it. $39.99 is not enough for you. Like, there's value to that sweater because of what it represents to her. The price tag didn't really matter in that situation. But my whole life, I looked at everything as a price tag. And as I'm learning how money works and I'm learning how people who have money and effectively use it, how they think about money, more importantly, I'm realizing like, oh my gosh, like my relationship with this is all jacked up. I'm worried about every single penny. I'm reluctant to invest in my family, in like experiences because it costs too much. I would have put that sweater back on the shelf and said, sorry, Nana, I'll see you in heaven. Good luck. Hope it's not too cold. So I had to really figure that out. And as I started to figure that out, the only way I had this tug on my heart for years, really, so my faith is important to me. So I wanted to tithe. Tithe is just a term of giving away 10% of your income. I had wanted to do that for a long time, but I wasn't making enough. And I had all the reasons to do it, then not do it, then not do it. And that seesaw for me was driving me wild. And it was totally spinning up my relationship with money in a bad way. I don't seesaw with anything really in my life. Look, I have 7 children, homeschooling, pro athlete, 40 entrepreneur at 40 years old with 7 kids. If I'm going to do something, I go all in and I do it, except in this area. I'm seesawing, I'm fence riding, and I can't stand it. So I made this commitment as I'm learning how it works. I'm like, look, I can't let this thing continue to do what it's doing to me emotionally. I am going to open up this separate account. I'm going to call it as a family. We're going to call it a blessing account. It's going to represent my tithe. It's going to be for other people. I'm not going to touch it. I'm sick of worrying back and forth saying I got enough this month. I don't have enough this month. I have enough. I'm just going to make a commitment and do it. But I know myself. I can't put it in my own bank account because I'll just transfer back and forth. I'll continue to ride the fence. So I set up a separate account, separate bank, separate debit card, all the things. And I included my family in this, which I'm really grateful I did because now my kids like really understand the value of money, not because, oh, it's fun to have money, but because of the impact it can make in people's lives. So I have the separate account and I just start doing it. I set aside, I get paid, 10% goes right into there. And I just keep that system running. It's just a system. It's just 10% goes there instead of into my own bank account. And now this thing starts to grow a little bit and I can actually do some cool things for people because I've committed to that being for other people. And I'm finally, for the first time in my life, all in on that. I'm learning like I'm not so worried about money anymore.
Matt, thanks so much for doing this. This has been awesome. You brought the stories, you certainly have brought the knowledge, and you also have brought, maybe more than anything, is the simplicity to this topic that people find so unbelievably overwhelming at times. So thank you for doing this. But before you go, tell the listeners where they can connect with you and possibly get some advice from you if that's what they're in the market for.
Yeah, man, thank you for having me. Thank you for this whole conversation. And thanks for that. Yeah, my name, Matt Morizio, is my Instagram handle. So it's at Matt Morizio. That's probably the best place to find me and just to get to know me and my life and what I stand for and probably learn a few things along the way finance related. You could also visit my website, reconstructingwealth.com. That's possible. And check out the brand and what we're about. And the one thing I will say is if you want to follow me on Instagram, send me a DM and just say that you heard this conversation, I can send you a link to a video recording that like a 3-part episode or series on like changing your relationship with money, the mindset of money, some real like blocking and tackling on money. And I can send you the link and it's free to whoever wants it. It'll cost maybe an email address, that's about it. But I'm happy to share that with your listeners too as a way to continue the education process, maybe not yet speaking to a human.
Awesome. I love that. Thanks again, Matt. Best to you and your family. And thanks for all you do. Thanks so much.